Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to have everyone here as we spend some time today talking about the incredible show, the last 10 hours that it filled our time and our day with The Last Dance, and to talk about all things basketball and all things Chicago with the president and the chief operating officer of the Chicago Bulls, and just a wonderful human being, Michael Reinsdorf. But to get us in the mood, as people get in, Danny is our technician today, and we're going to just start with a little highlight film, a little thing in case you missed some of the series, in case you didn't know how good the Bulls were in 1998. To put you in the mood for a little basketball, we present an ESPN highlight film from 1998.
A farewell tour for the dynasty.
On the second on it. With the left hand, he leans into the lane and tosses it home. Oh, Jordan to the wrapped up by Austin. Somehow, some way. Coach for Michael against under and 2.5 as only he can. Michael working on Russell brings them to within 1. Malone is doubled. They swat at it and steal it. Seconds from game 7 or from championship number 6. Michael Jordan running on fumes with 45 points. That may have been the last shot Michael Jordan will ever take in the NBA. The Chicago Bulls have won the championship, and it's their second three-peat. He no longer needs accomplishments to prove his case as the greatest player in NBA. What a way to close the book.
What a way to close the book on an amazing three-peat. Unfortunately, I know that the technology didn't work as well as we had hoped, but what a great moment. So tonight's guest is Michael Reinsdorf, the former owner of the Stockton Thunder, an ECHL team, and at age 14, as a student at North Shore Country Day, Michael went on an internship with his father to spring training, and so began a life of sports, so began a life of connected to amazing teams here in the Chicagoland area. And in 2010, Michael became the president and chief operating officer of the Chicago Bulls. He is a wonderful husband to Nancy, an amazing father, and he cares deeply about his family, about his friends, about being Jewish, and he cares deeply about sports, and especially the Chicago Bulls. So it is my great honor to introduce Michael Reinsdorf. Michael, how are you doing today? Michael, are you there?
He's muted.
Can you hear me? It says I'm muted.
Michael Reinsdorf, are you?
How about now?
You are unmuted. You are good. Are you there?
Am I good? Are you sure? Yes. Can
We're
you hear
having
me?
a tough. We're good. We're good. Yep. Now we can hear you. Can you hear me?
Everyone can hear me? Are you sure? Thumbs up? Yeah, I can hear you. Everyone else
Thumbs
is
up if
frozen
you can
though,
hear Michael. Can you hear me? Well, Zoom has been having problems for the last 24 hours. Are we there? Can I ask that?
I'm here.
Herb, can you hear me? Okay. Bob
Yes,
Lansman, can you
I
hear
can.
me? I need
Please.
someone to give me a positive affirmation that you can hear. Shake your heads if you can hear, or hold up a thumbs if
I
you
can
can
hear.
hear. I see about 2. Markowitz's, can you hear? Markowitz family, can you hear?
No, there's one by the bedroom.
So Michael, let's just begin.
Okay.
I don't know if it's
Here.
internet connection. Are we up? Okay, great. So Michael, I want to just begin that I wish I had another 10 hours, because by far the best 10 hours of the last 10 weeks have been the 10 hours that I spent watching The Last Dance. Like so many others, I've loved this, I'm not sure I can call it a documentary. I love this docu-series. It was witty, it was informative, it was insightful, it was heartfelt, it was emotional, it was a little vindictive. It shared the myth, the epic, the journey, and the nostalgia of the glory years of the Chicago Bulls. Without live sports on TV, The Last Dance filled a void for us, and it gave us something to talk about. Not just for the 2 hours on Sunday night, but it gave us something to talk about all week long. So I just want to begin with you. So what are your memories of Michael Jordan?
Oh my gosh, I got so many incredible memories over the years. My dad's group bought the Bulls, Herb, you're a part of that, back in 1985. So that was Michael's rookie year. And I was 18 years old. And so most of my early years of watching the Bulls were actually from afar while I was in college. I'd come home and watch games on vacations, but some of my favorite memories those early years, and they were captured in the documentary, was the game against the Boston Celtics in, I don't remember what year it was. I think it was 1986. And Michael scored 63 points, and it was an incredible game. But I can remember watching that game in the A Pi fraternity. And it was hard because there were a lot of people that were actually rooting for the Celtics. Obviously, I was a wreck, but the thing is that Michael, he was so clutch. Like, if you go back and watch the film, he actually had to make 2 free throws. They called a foul at the end of the game. I think he was shooting a 3, but in those days, if you got fouled on a 3, you only got 2 free throws. And he had to make 2 free throws to send the game in overtime, but the clock was at 0. So it was before they had tenths of a second on the clock. And so literally he was the only player on the court, and he had hit 2 free throws to send it in overtime. And I remember him making those free throws, just thinking to myself, how could anyone with that kind of pressure make those free throws? But it was kind of the beginning of Michael. And then my favorite memory of the 80s would be going back to the shot he hit against Craig Elo. And again, I was a senior in college at University of Arizona, and I had to go to a sports bar to watch it. It was called Daddy Jack's Sportsorama. And I remember watching that game, and I literally would not leave my seat because I was so nervous. I didn't want to jinx it. And, he hit that shot over Elo. I was talking to my friend the other day. He said, yeah, you threw a chair. And I said, don't doubt that I threw a chair, but I think I threw the chair the play before when Elo scored to go ahead by 1 point with about 2 or 3 seconds left. I remember being pretty upset, but that shot was incredible. And it's just amazing when you watch it because, Elo plays great defense on Michael, and they both go up at the same time. And then Michael keeps going up and Elo starts coming down and Michael shoots the shot. What's amazing about that game is that Craig Elo actually had 15 points in the fourth quarter of that game, and I think he led Cleveland with 24 that game. So those are some great memories in the 80s, and then the 90s during the championship run. My favorite memories have to do with the championships, and it was very personal for me because in 1991 we finally got past Detroit, and then we had to wait to see who we were going to play in the finals. We were either going to play Portland or Los Angeles Lakers. And I remember going crazy. I so much wanted to play the Lakers. And most people thought it was because we would have home court advantage. But the fact is that I started dating Nancy. And Nancy lived in California at the time. And we had gone on a few dates, but we hadn't spent that much time together. And so I really wanted to spend more time with Nancy. And so when the Lakers won, the Bulls ended up going out there for games 3, 4, and 5. So I spent a week with Nancy out in LA, and that kind of cemented our relationship. And then a few months later, she ended up moving back to Chicago. So, it was some great memories with Michael. The championship in year 2 against Portland when we were down 16 points. And I remember starting that fourth quarter, Michael on the bench, and it was such a great memory of Michael actually waving the towel when we came back, because it was Pippen started that fourth quarter with 4 of our reserves, and Michael was really a cheerleader during that time. That was just the loudest I've ever heard the Chicago Stadium. So I have great memories of Michael as a player, and some great memories of Michael as in his role as owner of the Charlotte Bobcats. We often sit next to each other in NBA meetings, and so we've had some great conversations over the years.
That's amazing. So what is it about Michael? What made him that player that just kind of transcends time and space?
Well, I think his personality, especially early on in his career, he had so much charisma and a great smile, and he did things that most of us could only dream of doing. I mean, even if you lowered the basket to 8 feet, I couldn't do the things that he does on a 10-foot basket. But he just performed on a basketball court like no player ever did before. And I think it was, the 80s and the tie into Nike and the commercial appeal of Michael. I think it just was the right intersection. But overall, he was one of the great players. He is the greatest player of all time, but he really lifted the NBA. I mean, it started back in 1979, I think, or maybe it was 78, 79. The NBA Finals used to be recorded on tape delay by CBS. And then Magic and Michael came to the league, and they started the league, started to rise. But when Michael came in, it just took off. And some of the things he was doing, it was just crazy. And he created fashion. I mean, think about the sneaker wear today, the way people wear, buy shoes and stuff. He started that with his first Air Jordan. So just incredible. It's just incredible to think how long ago it all started.
I think I read in the newspaper today that, Michael said that, or one of the commentators said that there was Michael's belief that was nothing mattered more than winning. And, kind of that was what set him apart. And I was so struck by that quote that, he just was able to win at any time that he wanted. And he could will that, he could make that happen. What was, what was your take on? Go ahead.
My take on, look, he's got to be one of the most competitive people that has ever played the game. His will, I mean, obviously there's a lot of people just as good athletes as Michael Jordan, but I think it was his will to win that separated him from anyone else. I read a stat today that I think he shot like in under 24 seconds left in the game, less than 24 seconds left in the game or in overtime, he shot 50% in the playoffs, on shots to give the Bulls a lead. And I don't think anyone else, even cracked 30%. It was some weird stat, but it was just like, he wasn't afraid to take that shot. And, his competitiveness, his desire, the Bulls never lost a playoff series that we should have won. You know what I'm saying? Like, it took years for us to build up, and we took a slow, methodical approach, and we didn't panic. But he came in the league in '84. He lost playoff series early on in his career, but those are all games against playoff teams that we should have lost to. But the minute that he got to the top of that mountain he never lost another playoff series that he should have won. The only other playoff series he lost was against Orlando, but that was, you got to put an asterisk against that because he played 17 games at the end of the year when he came back. So you're right. His will to compete and to win and at all costs is, there's no one like him.
Beautiful. So what did you think of the series? What did you think of the show?
I loved it. It was, I watched. Can you hear me? Rabbi, can you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you. You're good.
I thought the series was great. I watched the first eight episodes a couple of months ago, so they gave me an advanced peek. I thought it was tremendous. It was very insightful. I thought Michael was incredibly candid. I thought they did a really good job of showing the type of person that Michael was and some of the things that he had to deal with, the pressure. I mean, I certainly knew he was under a lot of pressure during those years, but reliving it and watching it now, I realized like he couldn't go anywhere without people swarming him, and especially in the second three-peat, like the pressure to carry that team everywhere he went, thousands of people, waiting for him. And whether he's before a game, after a game, he got back to the hotel. It was great. And the way they showed the footage and Michael's candidness on the interviews was actually pretty remarkable. He said some things that I would not have thought that he might have talked about, but he didn't hold back on anything. And I think we got to see who what type of person he was.
What was your favorite moment in the series? Favorite moment?
I think my favorite moment was last night watching the end when Bob Costas was talking about the last 42 or 45 seconds of the game against Utah in Game 6, and the way they added the music, and I was like, I was tearing up because it's so dramatic, and it was probably the best 45 seconds individual players played in the NBA when you think about it and the circumstances. So, we're down 3 points with 42 seconds left. We need a quick basket so we can get the ball back even if they score. He ends up taking the ball to the basket in like 3 or 4 seconds, and then he steals the ball from Karl Malone. Only how many players would have known to not leave his defender and go to Malone and try to steal the ball. And then he hits the game-winning shot. And he was, for the last 42 seconds, nobody on the Bulls touched the ball other than Michael. And it was just, to me, it was just surreal. And I was tearing up. I was in tears watching it. But then again, I get very teary-eyed when I watch movies and stuff. Every time I hear the music and Brian's song, I cry. So that was probably my favorite moment of the documentary. I always like the end of movies anyway.
Rumor has it you cry at Shalom Rav every once in a while too. So kind of that's a good characteristic. Anything that you would have included that wasn't included?
I cry when more. Look, I think they could have done a better job of portraying, Jerry Krause and that whole dynamic. I think they were a little bit unfair at times to Jerry. But I understand what they were trying to accomplish. But when I look at it, I knew Jerry really well, and he certainly deserved better than he was treated in the documentary. And at the end of the day, you know, Jerry's a Hall of Famer. Okay, so you know, a lot of people say Jerry West is one of the greatest general managers of all time, which he is, and he didn't draft Magic Johnson, right? Someone else did. So I look at what Jerry did, and you know, he brought in Tex Winters and the triangle offense, which ended up winning 11 championships, right? So Tex was there for the Bulls 6, and then he went to the Lakers for their 5. So that's 11 championships. He hired Doug Collins, who was a great coach to take us from point A to point B. He then made the decision to let go of Doug and bring Phil Jackson in. I mean, who was hiring Phil Jackson? It wasn't like he was, you know, sought out by a lot of teams. He put Phil in that role. He traded up to get Scottie Pippen. He drafted Horace Grant. He drafted Tony Kukoc in the 2nd round. He traded for Dennis Rodman. He had a certain knack about roster construction. You'd think building a team around Michael would be really easy, but it's not necessarily the easiest thing. And sometimes you can have too many alpha males on a team. He surrounded Michael with great role players, guys like John Paxson, B.J. Armstrong, Steve Kerr, Wennington, Luke Longley. They all knew their roles, and that was part of the greatness of those teams. And I think Jerry did a terrific job. Now, having said that, like, look, he was horrible when it came to PR. Like, he was a PR nightmare. He was, you know, he was short. He was overweight. It wasn't like when you were with him, he was the most exciting person to be around, but he got the job done, right? He got the job done. And unfortunately, he got sideways, I think, with Michael early in Michael's career. And I think it was over when Michael got hurt and the minutes restrictions, which again, in the documentary, they say that Michael was on a time limit, 14 minutes a game. And they made a big deal about that. You know, he went over if they went over the 14 minutes, they were going to fire the coach. That's, first of all, it's not accurate. Second of all, he started on a 14-minute restriction. And then by the time that game in Indiana happened, he was on a 28-minute restriction. Like, so they didn't really portray it properly, but it's too bad that Jerry, Krause, and Phil, that whole dynamic happened. And it didn't start out that way. I think it kind of evolved. Maybe it was towards the end of the 4th championship, maybe the beginning of the 5th championship season, that somehow their relationship kind of went sideways. But going back to the Michael Jerry Krause relationship, I think early on Jerry used to like joke around with him and tease him and tell him that Elgin Baylor was the best player he ever saw, and I think that kind of fueled Michael. And then I think the way he talked to Michael about not coming back and playing, and, you know, we got to protect you. You're one of our you're a big asset to this organization. And I don't think Michael liked the idea of being referred to as an asset. So it was just a lot of different things. But overall, Jerry was a really good general manager.
Michael,
yes,
if he had looked like Pat Riley, he would have been much more popular.
People, I mean, let's face it. When you look at those video of him, you're just like, I mean, his nickname was Crumbs, and Michael likes to say, or maybe it's Charles Oakley, they both think they invented that nickname, but the truth is that nickname was given to him by some scouts in baseball years ago. And I think my dad might have mentioned that nickname to someone at some point, and then the players kind of took off on it. But he just was a mess, right, Herb? Like,
Yeah, no, he was a complicated guy. Yeah. But the truth is, he was a great general manager. You forgot about Bill Cartwright.
Right, Bill Cartwright.
They needed a center to play against the big centers in their conference. He went and got one, and traded a great player to get him.
I don't know if we could have won. I'm not saying we couldn't have won, but those Knicks teams, especially in '93 when they had home court advantage, like, I mean, he wore down Ewing, and he was a big part of our success. And believe me, Michael was pissed off when we traded Oakley. I will tell you the one great thing that Michael did was that's different than today is early on, he would talk about how he'd want to trade for guys like Walter Davis and stuff like that. But he did totally back off at some point where he let Jerry be the general manager and didn't cause a lot of problems from that perspective and allowed us to put guys around him. We consult. I know that Jerry and my dad consulted with him when it came to, bringing Rodman in, but that was a big move and something that we needed to have sign off from our team leaders and Scotty and Michael.
Only Scotty and Michael could have kind of kept Dennis in check the way that they did.
There's no other team that Dennis would have been able to be successful with at that point in his career. He had respect for Michael and Scotty, and he toed the line to a degree, right? Like, I mean, it was hard. And Phil allowed him just to do whatever he wanted. And that was the problem in San Antonio where he was with before. They tried to make him conform, and he was just not going to conform. And so Dennis, over the years, became more of a character, really. Like, he was almost like a sequel to a movie. Like, he started by painting, coloring his hair, and then he got a lot of attention for that. So then he added some tattoos, and he got more attention. Then, he started doing all kinds of crazy things. And so he just kept wanting to make it more and more crazy. And it did get kind of out of control. And you saw it in the documentary. You saw, like, the guy left in the middle of the finals in the sixth year, to miss practice,
to go wrestle.
To go to a wrestling event. So, like, what? I mean, I guess in some way Phil's greatness was letting him do what he did. But there's not many teams that would have worked for.
Let's talk about Phil for a minute. As you watch The Last Dance, which doesn't make it clear that Michael, Scotty, and Dennis were all at the tail end of their prime, why wasn't Phil Jackson the right coach to guide a rebuild? Why don't you, what made Phil the right coach for the first 6 years, but kind of why wasn't he a possibility to rebuild this team?
Well, history will never know whether he would have been a good coach to build for a rebuild team. I mean, I think he probably would have been a great coach. I mean, he's arguably one of the greatest coaches of all time. I mean, I put him in the same category as, Popovich, and I guess you got to put Red Auerbach. But when the Celtics were winning their championships in that, in the 60s and the dynasty, I think they won 9 and 11 years. I think there was like 7 or 8, maybe at the most 10 teams. So it's a little different, but Phil was an incredible coach. The bottom line is that Phil didn't want to stay on and be part of a rebuild, or whether you want to call it a retool with Michael. He was smart enough to know, like, I've been at the Bulls for 9-10 years, whether an assistant coach or head coach, and he wanted a break. And in the documentary, it's very clear. He said Jerry Reinsdorf offered me the opportunity to come back, and it was just time. I think he wanted to take a break, and I think when you win 5-6 championships like that, I don't think you really want to be part of a situation where you don't have a chance to win championships. And I think he probably figured, I'll just wait my time and I'll find a situation with another team that's, has championship caliber players. And he got very fortunate that he ended up in a situation in LA where, that team was primed to win championships. And, but he maximized, their success.
I read a great quote in his book that said, I took comfort in the knowledge that letting go is a necessary, if sometimes heart-wrenching, gateway to genuine transformation. So, I mean, I think that just fits his zenness,
Yeah.
That it was just time to let go.
Yeah. I think it was time. I think he saw the handwriting on the wall. That team was, I mean, after you watch this documentary, it's clear that we had run out of gas. Like, we had enough gas. It's like we were driving that car. We saw the gas. We saw we were about to run out of gas, and we just got into that gas station in time, But that was it. Like, it was going to be really difficult. I don't see how we would have even won a Game 7 that year, given Scotty's health in Game 6. It would have been really, really hard to win a Game 7. And so I think he saw I think we all saw that it was all coming to an end. All these players' contracts are up, and it was just a really, really difficult, not difficult, it was just an incredible time, but, you know, it had run its course, but it was a great time.
It sure was. How do you think your dad was portrayed in the film?
I mean, I think he was portrayed. I think he was portrayed well. I mean, I think anyone who knows my dad knows that, you know, his motto is he's an honest and straightforward person. And early on, I got some funny texts from different people who don't know my dad very well, and they were just laughing about how not tough he was, but how, you know, like, look, you sign a contract and you live by that contract. And so I think what they could have done better job of is when they talked about Scotty's contract, like Scotty signed a 6-year contract with the Bulls because he wanted the security and because he had health injuries. So he was worried. It wasn't, there was a few reasons. Also, he had family situation, but he was concerned about his health. And he signed a 6-year deal. And no one points out that in the first 2 years of that deal, he was a top 10 paid player. So in year 1 and 2, when he was a top 10 paid player, was it a bad contract? No. The problem is that when you sign a long-term contract in sports, if you stay healthy, by the end of that contract, and you still have all your, you know, your skills, you're going to be underpaid. And with the way the NBA works is, you know, as revenues grow, contracts grow. And so first 2 years, the contract was great. Years 3 and 4, it started to get, you know, he started to go down towards the middle. And then by the end of that contract, he was way underpaid. There's no question about it. But that's the security. It's not like players, you know, Derrick Rose signs, you know, a 4-year or 5-year extension with us before he blows out his knee. It's not like a player comes to us and says, I'm sorry, I can't perform at the level that I thought I was going to be, so here's your money back. I think they could have done a better job in the documentary of explaining that type of situation. And then, you know, at the end, I think that they cut out a lot of stuff that my dad talked to him about the, you know, the ending of the dynasty and stuff like that. So they could have included more of that. But I think we all knew how that documentary had to end, and that's how it ended. But overall, I think it was fine. I think my dad, I think he looks pretty good. I guess it depends on your perspective. I mean, I'm biased, so I thought he looked pretty good. But if you go on Twitter, there's a lot of people saying it looked like you know, he didn't look so great. But overall, I think what you see in that documentary from my dad is exactly who he is.
Well, it was pretty remarkable. So let's switch gears a little and let's talk about the last 22 years. So since the dynasty came to an end, it's been a difficult 22 years. I have to say, as a rabbi, I peaked early. I came to Chicago in 1995. I had 3 amazing years. It's been nothing kind of equaled even a Cubs World Series. That was pretty close, but there was nothing like those.
It just went out for a second. I couldn't hear you.
I know. So talk about the future. You had 2 great hires this year. Some say the best that you possibly could have done with people who really want to build a winning team. Tell us about who you chose and why do you think they're the right guys for the rebuild?
Yeah, we hired Arturas Karnišovas. He's a former Lithuanian player. He's the first Russian player to play in college. Went to Seton Hall, and he has a great pedigree. He never played in the NBA, but he played it in Europe, and he then went to work in the NBA. Then went from the NBA to the Houston Rockets, working for Gerald Morey, Northwestern grad, right, Morty? Or graduate school? Ella, yeah. And then went over to Denver Nuggets as their general manager. He's got a great pedigree. He's got incredible relationships in Europe, and that's a big part of it. Is the European players. There's such an influx of players, and I don't think that's going to change. And he's got great connections in Europe. He's big on player development. most importantly, it's about process with a guy like AK. And the job of the head of basketball operations has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. The organizations have grown, and he's a leader. And we needed someone who could lead our organization. And Arturas really checks all the boxes from that perspective. And then a couple of weeks ago, we hired as a general manager Mark Eversley, who actually I'd already seen the episodes, but I missed episodes. I think it was 5 and 6 because I was interviewing Mark during the shows. But Mark started his career actually at Nike, and then went to work in Toronto, then was in Washington, Philadelphia. He's got a great pedigree himself, really relates well to the players, and, is a great judge of talent, good scout, but, also understands players really well. And I think that was really important. I wanted Arturas to have a good complement with them, with what he brings to the table. And, Mark has been in the NBA since I think 2007. Both guys, Mark's actually from Canada, so I've got all foreigners working for us. But I think it's a great duo. I haven't met any of these people in person yet. It's kind of weird to interview, to do Zoom interviews with hiring such high level people. But we got it done, and it's exciting. But I can't wait till we can all get together in person and spend time with each other. But I'm excited. I'm really excited about the reorg, and looking forward to some good days with the Bulls for sure.
That's so great to hear. Let's talk about the NBA just in general. You continue to have calls with NBAs and executives across the league. Where do you think things stand with the hiatus, as the NBA has said that they're looking to make a decision in the next couple of weeks on return to play?
I mean, I don't have any more knowledge, and nor does Adam or anyone else, more than anyone else has right now. I am hopeful. I'm hopeful we'll get back. I think the league's gonna, we're gonna know one way or another next 2 or 3 weeks what direction we're going, and we're gonna let Adam and the league kind of run this process out. But I'm hopeful. I'm definitely I miss sports. We need it back.
Absolutely. How do you think the NBA is going to be different post-COVID? I mean, kind of where augmented reality, TV game experiences, technological enhancements, no fans, home viewing. I mean, how do you think it's going to be different?
Well, if you don't have fans at games right now, which I think is pretty much a certainty that even when we come back, we're not going to have fans right away. How are those games going to be televised? And are they going to, pipe, are they going to have crowd noise? Are they going to have, they're going to superimpose fans into the stadium? Like, there's all kinds of things like that they got to think about, and we got to figure out. But I think post-COVID, the biggest change that we're going to have to deal with is how you enter the arena and how you interact when you're in the arena, how you get your food, what happens when you're sitting next to people. I think those are all things that we're going to have to look at in the next few months.
Absolutely. Herb, I'm going to open up your mic, and anything you want to say. You represented Doug Collins, you represented Tony. You kind of lived this all throughout your career. Thoughts on the end, the last episode, and kind of where we wound up on the last dance.
I got to unmute. I think the show was terrific. Very exciting. I think it was particularly exciting for Chicagoans who lived through this. But I think the way it ended was the way it should end. Michael might not be happy to hear that Michael Jordan thinks they should have played another season, but that's what any great player would say. He didn't think he could ever lose. In fact, he was probably always surprised when they did lose a game. So I think it ended properly. It was Michael Jordan's show. He had last cut on the editing of this series. So I think it ended the way he expected it then, by saying that he wanted to continue playing. I think it was terrific. I think it caught, particularly Tony's years, it caught the spirit of the team, really caught the spirit of the team. And the anger that some of them had at Krause, Pippen had at everybody in management, because, and I agree with Michael, when you do a long-term contract, you have to explain to your client that somebody's going to make more money than you once you get to the last few years of the contract. And they all say they understand. Nobody understands. Yeah. They're always unhappy when they find out somebody on the team is making more money. It always happens. So you have to just be very careful and explain. And I know from being involved in all this, that Michael's father explained to him that he would not be happy with this contract eventually. Am I right?
Yeah.
Michael?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, that's the bottom line. But you're right about, Herb, you're right about what you're saying. Like, of course, Michael is going to say, I wanted to go for a 7. There's no question. And his explanation, it was very hard to swallow that, because at the end of the day, you had guys like Luke Longley and Steve Kerr. Like, Luke Longley signed a $30 million contract to go play with Phoenix, right? Like, he wasn't going to stay. He wasn't going to stay for one more championship. Dennis Rodman was falling apart. Like, you know, he played another, 50 games, I think, or 35 games in his career. Even if they could have convinced Phil, even Michael said, now, Scotty, that would have been the tough one, but he would have come back. Well, no. Like, Scotty ended up signing a $70 million contract. So if I were Scotty and I was offered to come back to the Bulls to play, say they offered him $10 million, $15 million for 1 year, or I can get $70 million to play with Houston. Like, of course you're going to take this.
No, for sure. And he received $70 million because you guys gave him a sign and trade.
Right.
And did him a huge favor, and he still didn't forgive Krause.
But I will tell you, Scotty told me years later, told me, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 years ago, he goes, you guys were right not to re-sign me. He goes, I was never the same after that 6th championship. Remember, he had surgery in July of that year after the 6th championship. And then there was the lockout. And then, Michael actually cut his thumb
with the cigar cutter.
Right. So Michael wouldn't have probably been able to play in that next year. I mean, we were on fumes. I mean, could we have gotten out of the East? I mean, first of all, if you lose guys like Luke Longley, because of salary cap, you can't just add new guys because you're at salary cap consideration. So, look, I love that Michael thinks we would have won the 7th championship. That's what he should say. That's what he should believe. In my heart, I believe that, we went out on top. And for me, that's now in retrospect, I love the way it ended. I love the way that we ended as champs. How many boxers have stayed on too long? How many teams have stayed together too long to only be beaten? Detroit, we beat the Pistons. Like, to me, that's almost like a 7th championship, right? No one can ever say that about the Chicago Bulls dynasty. No one beat the Chicago Bulls. To me, that's pretty cool.
but Michael, players want to defend their championships. That's what they want. But you're right. When money's involved, Longley's going to Phoenix. He's not going to stay in Chicago. They can say it, and they do mean it. They do want to defend their championships, but it rarely happens.
Right.
But again, guys, I just want to remind you, it's against the backdrop that everyone, it was out there in public that even if that team went 82-0, there was no way that this team was going to be together again.
No, see, that was Jerry Krause's, the stupidity of that comment was just ridiculous. Like, at the time, my dad said to him, Jerry, it's stupid. And I was just talking to my dad the other day. He goes, it's 20 years later, and it's still a stupid comment. Like, he had no business ever saying something like that. He was so mad at Phil. He loved Phil. And then when that relationship went sour, he couldn't help himself. And to me, like, the thing that bothers me about that whole era is that somehow my dad kind of got dragged down with the whole Jerry, as the Jerry and Jerry against, Jackson and the Bulls. And it's like, it's not true. Like, my dad offered Phil to come back. What people don't know is that, when my dad's in the Hall of Fame, and to get into the Hall of Fame, part of the process is you have to have letters of recommendation. And one of the letters that was written was actually by Phil Jackson to the Hall of Fame. And in this letter, he talks about my dad and how much he appreciated my dad. And the fact is that my dad offered him to come back twice at the end, and Phil just said it was time. So believe me, if Phil had wanted to come back, we could have, he could have come back. In fact, then we would have had to, then we had to go to Michael, and he would have to say, yes, I'm coming back. And then they would have had to get Scotty. That would have been getting Scotty would have been incredibly hard. And getting those other players, it would have been very difficult. But look, it is what it is. It was a great run.
Absolutely. Mark Bartelstein, I think you're with us. Any thoughts on the end, how it ended, and kind of where you come out on at the end of the show, and your players?
Yeah, sorry getting late. I just got home, but I thought the show was great. I mean, obviously, I represent Steve. I thought it was fascinating for him to be able to kind of tell his life story yesterday, which a lot of people I'm not sure were aware of.
Steve's dad, the story of Steve's dad was amazing.
Yeah. No, it's his entire life is amazing. It really is. And so it was interesting for me, for the rest of the world, to kind of get to see that from Steve's perspective yesterday. But I would say that, in terms of the breakup of the team, because it's funny, I've had so many of my clients that actually called today asking, how could that happen? Why didn't they bring him back? And because I think what was untrue and what they kind of messed up on the documentary there at the end was they said that Steve and Scotty had been traded, and they weren't really traded. They were what's called sign and trade, which is a mechanism that you use in free agency, and it's way too complicated to get into all of that, but they were free agents. And what really happened was Steve was offered a long-term lucrative deal, but that could be enhanced greatly if we did a sign and trade. So I went to Jerry and Jerry and asked if they would do us a favor and do this sign and trade that we had put together, so Steve could earn, which was worthy about an extra $7 million. And they were gracious enough to do that for us, so that Steve could get the long-term deal. Because you have to remember that Steve had never made he had made very little money at that point of his career. When he was signed with the Bulls, he was just a journeyman. And so this was his one opportunity to get financial security. And the same thing with Scotty. They did the same thing with Scotty. Scotty was a free agent. He got traded to Houston in also a sign and trade that allowed Scotty to get more money than he could have got straight through free agency. And the same exact thing with another client of mine, Judd Bushler. So the notion that the players would have all said, we'll sign up for one more year, that would have been very difficult for those guys to do it, because this was their moment to get security for their families, and it would be hard to pass up for guys who had not made a lot of money. So that was going to be a tough, a big hill to overcome. And I do think that Phil was at that point sort of emotionally ready to go on to a new chapter in his life. I think Phil felt like this was the right time, the right ending. They had built the whole season up to be the final dance. And I think Phil really kind of wanted to just end it on top, is the sense I really got at the time.
Hey, Mark, what do you think those players would have said had we said, okay, we're all coming back. Michael's going to get $40 million. We're going to give Pippen $15 million. And Judge, you're going to get $300,000. And, Curry, you're going to get $500,000. Like,
yeah. See, what the problem is, because the Bulls were over the salary cap, and there was no luxury tax at that time. People think they just could pay whatever they wanted, but there's still some ramifications. And I think you, Michael, you guys could have paid him maybe a premium for 1 year, but the premium wouldn't have been enough to overcome the security those guys were going to get on a 5-year deal. For Steve, that 5-year contract was a huge moment in his life to get that deal, because he was, like I said, he when he came to the Bulls, he was making very little money and was finishing out that contract. I think Judd was on a minimum contract, you know, and then we went to Detroit. So it just wasn't probably feasible economically. I think there would have been, you know, the guys would have thought about it, because to come back and get a four-peat would have been something that, you know, you make history, but I just don't know economically if it could have worked.
Yeah, no, I agree. You earned your fee.
No, Michael earned the fee. I just signed the contract. Michael did all the work.
Michael, Herb, and Mark, in Grant Park after the sixth championship, Michael came on the stage and said, "One thing I know in my heart, my soul, my love has always gone to the city of Chicago. And I know no matter what happens, my heart and my soul and my love will still be in the city of Chicago." Do you think that 22 years later, that still holds true?
No. His heart's on a golf course in South Florida. For sure.
Okay. His house is still for sale, by the way. It's discounted half price right now, but his house is still for sale. Mark, what your thoughts?
I mean, I think, you know, the one thing with Michael, I think I said this a couple weeks ago when we were on, and I think it came through last night. I mean, he was tough on everybody, and he was, you know, obviously incredibly competitive, but he could, you know, that he needed to have that mindset to perform at that level. But he was also very loyal and very generous to the people that he really felt had his back. And I think you saw that last night and how he took care of Gus. And even like I said, with Charlotte right now, everybody who works for Charlotte is connected to his life, either through North Carolina or through Nike for the most part. And so I think Michael I think he would always be very loyal to the people of Chicago and the way he was treated here. You know, I don't think there's any question about that.
No, I actually think Michael, I think that's a true statement. In fact, back when we were chasing after LeBron in free agency back in 2010, a lot of people were worried that Michael would badmouth the organization to LeBron. And in fact, it was quite the opposite. He actually told LeBron he should come to Chicago. That was his advice, because he said, you know, this is a great sports town. It's a great organization. You know, he and my dad have a great relationship. I mean, every time I see him, he's always telling me how much he appreciates my dad. He really appreciated the fact that we paid him while he was playing baseball. You know, I think he generally cares about the city, and I think he knows this is where it started. I loved how it ended with, you know, it just takes a match or whatever, like, to start the fire. Like, I loved how they talked about Gus yesterday, and they didn't mention that I think he paid for all his medical expenses. I know in one of the episodes they talked about, you know, how he, you know, the interactions he would have with like the Make-A-Wish kids before games, but he did it every single game. Every single game there was something like that, and he did things, you know, without fanfare. And those security guards, they were part of his group and they were part of his family. And he did. You're right, Mark. He took care of those people. And
take care of so many. There's so many players that work for him now that have had lifetime jobs with Charlotte that were a part of Michael's life, you know, with the Bulls. I mean, he doesn't call. He's very private. He doesn't call attention to it. A lot of times people, every time they do something, you read about it in the newspaper, they do something good, you know, or read about it on the internet. And Michael does a lot of things that he doesn't draw attention to himself when he does it.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, he was the greatest basketball player of all time. He, like all of us, was a flawed human being. Like, he wasn't what he was presented to be like in the, you know, 80s and early 90s, you know, with all the commercials and stuff like that. And you saw who he was in this film. You saw the cutting edge that he had, but you also saw, you know, the sweetness that he had. And he's just a person like all of us. He just happened to be the greatest player of all time.
Absolutely. We're going to take some questions. If you want to throw them in the chat or raise your hand, we'll try to get to some of them. I wanted to just end with Barack Obama's comment at the end of episode 10. Michael Jordan helped to create a different way in which people thought about the African-American athlete, a different way in which people saw athletics as a part of the entertainment business. He became an extraordinary ambassador, not just for basketball, but I think for the United States overseas and part of American culture sweeping the globe. Michael Jordan and the Bulls changed our culture. That's an amazing statement.
Yeah, we were the first global team in sports.
You know, what's interesting about what Jordan did, and I mentioned it last time we were on, we used to, when you were traveling overseas and you told somebody you were from Chicago, they would say, oh, Al Capone. Then when you started traveling in the 90s, they'd say, you say Chicago, they'd say Michael Jordan.
Right.
Always Michael Jordan. A great ambassador for the city.
You know, there's nobody's changed professional sports like he has. And I do think, that you can't even to this day put a value on what he's done for the city of Chicago. I mean, Chicago is a tourist attraction. It was definitely changed forever by Michael Jordan. I mean, people came from all over the world just to get to a Bulls game or just to stand outside and try to catch his car driving by. I mean, they did. I mean, I know for my business in particular, it helped me in recruiting. I had so many kids who wanted to come to Chicago to go to a Bulls game just to be able to get into the United Center.
I had one of the funniest rabbinic stories of my career. In 1998, June of 1998, a family had given $1 million to donate for the social hall at Temple Sholem. And the dedication was set for Friday, June 8th. And it ended up being game 5. And the Tuesday after the Bulls lost, which forced to game 5, we got a call that said, we're going to have to cancel the dedication at the synagogue. And because the family had an entire row right behind the Bulls. And I'll never forget, like, oh my God, we've worked all year long for this dedication and we pushed it off 2 weeks because the Bulls it was game 5 of that season. So it was amazing. Any questions? I can call on one or two. I'm going to go with Scott Weil, who's a member of Am Shalom.
Well, first, I'm a little bit upset that Herb stole what I was going to mention, but that's very true about we used to be known for Al Capone. But and I just wanted to amplify what you said about a global team and what an attraction. I went to in 1998 when I think the Bulls were battling the Pacers for the division crown. I went to the final game in Indiana with some clients. I was shocked when the Bulls were introduced. They all got standing ovations in Market Square. So it's not a question. It's just a remembrance.
Yeah, no, they everywhere you go, even today, you go on the road and we have a lot of fans at our games, which is all testament to Michael and the 90s Bulls.
Absolutely. Steve Schomburger.
Yeah, great portrayal. I mean, I heard some that it was unfair to him. I thought it was fairly accurate. What did you think about the portrayal?
Of who?
Of Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen.
Look, I love how it ended last night because it showed what a warrior he was, and most guys would not have come back in that game, and you would see him wincing in pain. Scotty's just a proud person, so he's made some mistakes in his career, and the biggest mistake he made was the 1.8 seconds when he refused to go into the game because he wanted the play to be designed for him, and thank God, Herb, that Tony hit that game-winning shot, because I don't know what would have happened to Scottie Pippen at that point. We would have been down 3-0, and I'm not sure he would have stayed a Chicago Bull. But years later, Scottie had a chance to walk it back, or
he didn't,
and he didn't, because he just is a I know deep down, I know that Scottie knows he was wrong for doing that. He just didn't walk it back, and it's too bad he didn't. Because
it would have been a great moment for him to do that.
It was a great moment. It would have been a great moment, and he should have just walked it back. He should have just said, "Look, I made the most horrific mistake of my career, and it was wrong. It was wrong, and thank God that Tony saved me. And I was in tears after the game. I knew it was wrong. And I'm just glad that I got to be part of 3 more championships. That would have been the easy thing to say. Scotty, he was wrong. And Michael called him out in the show. He was wrong to wait to get surgery that last season. Like he could have gotten surgery after the 5th championship, and he would have been ready for the 6th championship. And the problem with him not having the surgery was it put everything on Michael. And if you look at Michael's stats the last year, he played 82 games. Actually, he played 82 games the last 3 years. And he played almost 39 minutes a game at his age. And that was because of Scotty not being there early on. Then Dennis was off doing his own thing. And so I think it portrayed Scotty as a person who's made a bunch of mistakes, but also, one of the greatest number 2 players of all time. And I know, just believe me from what I'm telling you, like he said stuff about us recently, and I reached out to him afterwards and we spoke for like an hour, and Scotty's heart is in the right place. Sometimes he just says the wrong things. And so I'm just glad that it ended last night with him getting back on that court and being a reason why we won, a 6th championship.
It was amazing. Shapiro's.
Hello, Michael.
Alyssa, I can't hear you.
Oh, haha. You are our favorite Michael from the Chicago Bulls. So I hope you appreciate that, because, that's a big thing. I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about how the 2 3-peat Bulls champions have still continued to play roles in the Bulls organization. I'm thinking particularly of Horace and Tony and Scotty, and how one thing that I've loved to watch sort of up close with you guys being like our extended family is to see how they still love the Bulls and the organization so much, and they step up and they show up and they're there as great ambassadors. But I think that that's more behind the scenes. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, when I came on,
we love you.
Thank you. We love you too. When I came on board, hey Morty. When I came on board, I really wanted to bring back, I wanted to bring back, some of the history of the Bulls, and that's how, Scotty came back. And unfortunately, hey, Rachel, unfortunately, Scotty ended up he moved back to Chicago and then moved back to California. So then all of a sudden he wasn't around, but Tony is an ambassador. We brought back Horace Grant. Horace Grant, we had a bad falling out with Horace Grant when he left to go play with Orlando. And I got to spend some time with Horace when the Bulls played out in Rio. And I decided, I said to my dad, I want to bring Horace back into the organization. Horace has been great. It's actually his son actually worked for us too for a few years. But Randy Brown was a coach for us. Stacey King's an announcer. I think it's important that your former players feel a part of the organization. I don't want them ever to feel like they can't come to games and be part of, what we're trying to do today. Tony sits up in the suite with me for most of the games, and he's so knowledgeable about the game, and he gets as frustrated as I do at the games, and Horace. And sometimes I got to tell Horace this, you got to settle Tony down, because there's only one person that can be a lunatic in the suite at one time, and that's me. So, but I think it's great to have those guys around. The players actually appreciate it. Like Horace is a celebrity to these guys. Like they and Tony, they know what they brought to the table. Guys like Laurie Marketing, like foreign players. Tony kind of led the way, right? Like Tony sacrificed so much of his game for the Chicago Bulls. Like Herb, you can add to this. Like had he played for another team, he would have been a perennial all-star. But he had to play, third fiddle, and so his game changed playing with the Chicago Bulls. But, I always want our former players, I don't care who you are, well, for the most part, I don't care who you are. If you're in town, you want to go to a Bulls game, I want you there. And so our door is always open for former players to come and hang out, come to practice, talk to the players, share their history, because it's a great fraternity. There's not that many players that have played for the Chicago Bulls, and they're all important to us. And
you brought Doug back too, right, for a little while?
Yeah, Doug's still part of our organization. I mean, Doug is incredible. He's so passionate, and he's a guy you could talk basketball with for hours at a time. And my dad fired Doug at a very crazy time 1989. We were within 2 games of going to the finals, and they made the decision to bring Phil on. But every year after we won championships, my dad would send him, we had championship watches, not just the rings, but these watches, and he would always send Doug one. And so they've always remained close over the years. And we brought Doug in to the organization a few years ago to help kind of be a mentor to Fred Hoiberg and then Jim Boylan. But he's been terrific, and
well, Doug has tremendous respect for your dad.
Yeah,
tremendous respect for your dad.
Yeah, he's always telling me how much he loves my dad, and I think my dad's kind of been like a second father figure at times to Doug.
David Stopek, question?
Yeah, we've talked about a lot of different things. What's kind of interesting to me is Michael's relationship with Nike. And it mentioned how during the Olympics, he was so upset about having to wear the Reebok outfit that he draped the American flag over it. Now, looking forward at the game, I know that ownership is looking for more ways to make money in endorsements of companies and logos and other things. Is individual players' interests diverging with management's? How do you look to manage those kinds of things going forward, particularly as we go through a lean year that this next year is going to be?
Well, it's hard. I mean, I'm looking back at like the years with Derek, and he was with Adidas, and so Nike, it's hard to get Nike involved, or we had a big sponsorship with Gatorade, and his sponsorship was Powerade. You're always going to have those issues, and these companies are sophisticated enough to understand that if they want to play a big play with the Chicago Bulls, then they probably want to figure out how to get endorsement deals with those stars, or they just stay away from those teams. So it hasn't been a huge problem for us, but the Nike thing, Nike never has had to spend a lot of money in Chicago anyways, because they've always owned the market because of Michael. But
I think it was episode 3 when they talked about Nike that they had hoped to make $3 million, and they ended up making $128 million in that first season. I mean, it was unbelievable.
How would you like to be the Adidas people when Michael said, "Yeah, I really want to be with Adidas"? It was just the perfect storm with Nike, and part of the reason I think Michael, Michael was underpaid his entire career with the Bulls, because he signed long-term deals, and he never said a word about it. But the Nike, the amount of money he's made, it
just keeps going. It doesn't stop.
It doesn't stop. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Yep. It's incredible.
I guess to follow up on that same trend, what do you think about the NCAA now starting to open up player revenues?
Well, it's going to be fascinating. It may change college sports. Well, it will change college sports forever. We'll have to see how they come out with the legislation and how they're going to enforce it and what the rules will be. But, it's not going to be a level. It hasn't been a level playing field because there's been a lot of people cheating behind the scenes over all these years. Now it will not be a level playing field, and it'll be allowed to not be a level playing field. So I don't know how you're going to have, schools that might not have the boosters or the fundraisers or the supports, the fans want to support the program, and similar to a place like a Michigan or an Ohio State or an Alabama in football, Clemson. I'm not sure how they're going to make it work, but it certainly will be good. There will be a small group of players that it will be very advantageous for.
Yeah. Mark, you nailed it. You're going to have such an advantage to some of these big schools. I don't.
You're going to see a lot of it's going to shrink. There's not going to be as many schools competing at Division I level. There's no way for them to compete, and so I think you're going to see a lot of these conferences are going to get swallowed into each other.
Sure, for sure. And we got time for one last question. I think it was Spencer Schomburger. Was that you who raised your hand? Go ahead. Spencer, go ahead.
Okay, so you talked about this a little bit. Steve Kerr had that trajectory from being an NBA journeyman to the Bulls, to the Spurs, to becoming a GM with the Phoenix Suns, then going to the Warriors. If the Bulls never happened, how would his career turn out? How would his life turn out? With all of the things that happened with his life, with his dad, it's truly a great story.
You know, I talked about this a couple weeks ago, and Steve and I were just talking about this actually yesterday. I always say that you got to work really hard to be successful in life, but you also have to have some luck. And the two together is when great things happen. And so Steve was going to be successful no matter what in his life, because he's, it's a kid who wasn't offered a scholarship and wound up becoming a great player at Arizona. Was never supposed to be in the NBA, and he made the NBA. He was going to keep finding a way to be successful. But there is no question that if Michael doesn't come out of retirement of baseball and decide to come back and play for the Bulls, I'm not sure Steve's life is where it is today, because winning 3 championships changed everything for him. It got him a big contract with San Antonio. That led to becoming, now he's a national figure because, what he did for the Bulls, then winning another championship, actually winning 2 more championships. Then he gets, the lead broadcaster for TNT because of that fame that he acquired during those years. He parlays that into being a general manager with the Suns, goes back to TNT, and then becomes the coach of the Warriors. And all of those things, happened because of the fact, that Michael came out of retirement. Now, the thing about Steve is, sometimes you can get lucky, but you better take advantage of your luck. And that's what Steve has done every step of the way. He does it with class. He does it with dignity. I mean, I think you saw last night, he never makes it about himself. It's always about others. And so his life would be different, but he still would have found a way to be very successful. There's no question about that.
I went to college with Steve Kerr. He was a couple years older, and he was on that Final Four team when I was at Arizona. And I lost a bet because I bet a friend of mine that he would never play a second in the NBA. And he ends up playing with the Chicago Bulls and winning 5 championships. So it shows you my scouting ability. But
even it's even when he said last night, I mean, just his personality was encapsulated perfectly when he said he got drafted by Phoenix. And they kept me around for a couple of years because I was he gave no credit to himself. It was they doing him a favor to keep him around.
No, I mean, he was, it was almost like, because he went to Arizona, they drafted him, but it's like, It boggles my mind because, Kerr was a good college player, wasn't All-American. And a guy like Steve Alford was an All-American, right? And played in the Olympics, and he can't make it in the NBA. And Steve Kerr has a 14-year career. It's just incredible. So, Mark, you're right. Part of it is being in the right place at the right time, but he took advantage of it.
So we're almost out of time. Here's my last question. If you were the producer of The Last Dance, is there anything that you would have included that wasn't included?
I would have had more Tony Kukoc.
Wow. What would I put in there? I don't know. I thought they got it pretty straight. I mean, obviously, it was done from Michael's perspective. So this was Mike. It wasn't as much the Bulls documentary as it was Michael's documentary, and so that's the way everything was sort of put forth. I'm sure if you got it through the lens of different players, you would have seen things maybe seen a broader range of what goes on with the team, the dynamics that happen every single day behind the scenes. But I think from Michael's eyes, to me, I thought they did as good a job as I thought it was terrific. I really did.
Yeah. And Michael Reinsdorf, before you answer the question, so this film crew was with the team through this Last Dance. When did you knew that it was in the can it was in production for all these years. When did you know it was going to kind of come to fruition?
I actually didn't know about it. It was a few years ago when someone from the NBA came up to me and started talking to me about it. The producer, Mike Tolan, reached out to me. By the way, Mike Tolan is the producer of one of my favorite movies ever, which is Big Fat Liar. But I went out and I was in California. I met with Mike Tolan in his office. And my concern was, I told the NBA and I told Mike, is that, like, it was weird. It wasn't like the NBA was it was kind of like they were kind of asking me like, are you okay with this? I don't think I fully comprehended what was going on. And I said, look, I want to make sure that my dad is, because I could see what could happen. This could get out of control, and it could make, they could do a documentary, it could make my dad look really bad, which I thought would be kind of a crappy thing, given that at the end of the day, it was my dad's decision to allow them to film, right? Like, so they went to my dad and they said, can we film? My dad said, yeah, you can film, but you got to get Phil's permission. And then they went to Phil and they said, okay, can we film? He said, yeah, but you got to get Michael's permission. So they go to Michael. Adam Silver is, working for NBA Entertainment at the time. And he says to Michael, can we film, worst case scenario, you'll have great home movies, but we won't do anything without your permission. So then they start putting this documentary together. Now, in retrospect, when I look back at it, it's like, should we have been more involved as an organization, since the Chicago Bulls have been more involved? I'm not sure it would have worked anyway. I do know that Michael, even though, it was a Jordan documentary, there weren't a lot of changes. They let this director go with it, and he directed it, and there weren't a lot of changes by Michael. He didn't say, like, take this out because, it makes me look bad. I mean, there was plenty of things in there that makes Michael look like, God, not such a nice guy. But then there's plenty of things that make him, also look like a great guy. But you could tell that it was honest and it was straightforward, because Michael said before it started, I think a lot of people are going to think I'm not such a great guy. I'm going to look bad in this. But I emailed with him during, a few weeks ago, and he just said, he goes, it is what it is. I wanted to be straightforward. And I do believe that the money that he's making from this, he's donating to charities. So I'm not sure what all the reasons why all of a sudden Michael finally decided to, give the okay for them to put this together, but it's fascinating. And when you look at it, we have a year of footage, and they probably used, if you add it all up, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes of actual footage from like behind the scenes in 1998, because a lot of the footage is before that. So I'd love just to get a look of what all that other stuff looks like, even the non-Michael Jordan stuff. It must have been just some fascinating footage, because they followed that team everywhere. So I think it was brilliant by the NBA to ask for permission. And I'm shocked that my dad and Phil gave the okay, because it's so not like those two to open the door like that. And I'm just glad they did, because there's so many people that never got to see, they've heard about the history, they heard, know about the dynasty, they know about Michael, but they never really saw him play games. And this finally, to me, it ends it once and for all, who the greatest player of all time is, and that's Michael Jordan. So for that, I'm so happy that this documentary came out, because I love the fact that, that's what it, what it ends it with. And I love those last 45 seconds.
Absolutely. And as your statue says right out in the new atrium, the best there is, was, and will always be. And that's Michael Jordan. And that's kind of, I think that it solidifies that. I read that great statement that said that if every year that Michael Jordan started at at training camp in the 1990s, he won a championship. And that's that is a pretty amazing statistic for sure.
Absolutely.
Caroline Abrams, as someone who works in the commissioner's office for the NBA, anything you want to share about if we're going to see basketball next year and what we're going to see this year?
Well, I think Michael would know more than I would, but just echoing everything, we're really hopeful that the season will start again. We're preparing for it, whether it starts in some form of this season or when we come back for next season. It's going to look different, and we're creating the contingency plans on the contingency plans. So it'll be exciting when it does return. I miss sports too.
Well said, Caroline.
Absolutely. Any other final comments? I have one last question to Herb and to Mark and to Michael. Do you think rabbis will ever get shoe contracts?
Yarmulke contracts.
If anyone does, it'll be you for sure. You'll break the mold.
You're
on my wall. Picture on my wall.
You're doing it for free. You wear your Northwestern Talis. You wear all these different things, and you're not getting paid for any of that.
Absolutely. With the greatest of pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, friends. This was absolutely great. We're going to unmute you so you can give Michael and Herb and Mark a round of applause.
Thank you.
I wanted to tell Dr. Shapiro, Northwestern graduate, law school.
What's that? Oh, Herb, you were cut out. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
I said, Dr. Shapiro, I just want you to know I'm a law school graduate of Northwestern. And my godson is the coach of the basketball team.
Great. Thanks a lot, everyone. Michael, a final statement. Anything you want to say?
Thank you for everyone. This was very fun.
Sorry about the weak internet at the beginning, but it all worked out, and we're delighted that you were all here. And we do have an ask out to Tony Kukoc to come and to talk to us. So hopefully that'll happen. Mark, if Steve Kerr wants to come, we'd love to have him as well. So let's see what we can do. Let's stay tuned for many wonderful events all throughout the month of June at Shalom. And please stay safe and stay healthy and stay sane and stay happy. And we've got lots of good things to look forward to. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you, Danny, for technology. And what a great evening. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thanks.